Knights and Crusaders, the Sword and the Cross. Chapter 1. The Call to Arms, Pope Urban II and the First Crusade. In the year 1095, Europe stood divided. Feudal lords ruled fragmented territories, kings struggled for dominance, and the spiritual heart of Western Christendom, the Roman Catholic Church, sought unity amidst chaos. But from the ashes of political disorder emerged a unifying cry, one that would ignite the fury of nations and alter the course of world history. At the center of the Church's resurgence stood Pope Urban II. Once a Cluniac reformer, now the Supreme Pontiff, Urban sought not only spiritual revival, but a means to consolidate papal authority. An opportunity arose when emissaries from the Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Comnenus arrived in Rome, pleading for aid against the Seljuk Turks, who had seized the Holy Lands and threatened Constantinople. In November 1095, Urban summoned nobles, knights, and clergy to the Council of Clermont in southern France. Before a captivated crowd, he delivered a thunderous speech that would echo through the ages. With words forged in fire and faith, he called upon the warriors of Christendom to take up the sword against the infidel and liberate the holy city of Jerusalem. God wills it. Let those who once fought for coin now fight for Christ. Let the blood of sin be washed by the blood of sacrifice. Across Europe, the cry spread like wildfire. From the lowliest serf to the highest noble, men and women alike pledged themselves to the cause. Entire families etched crosses on their garments, selling lands and leaving behind their homes. They believed they were marching to salvation, their sins absolved in return for a blade raised in God's name. But not all crusaders were knights. Inspired by fiery preachers like Peter the Hermit, tens of thousands of poor pilgrims, untrained, unequipped, formed the first wave. This so-called People's Crusade would march long before the nobles, destined for tragedy. Crossing into Byzantine lands, the People's Crusade wreaked havoc, looting towns and drawing the ire of their supposed allies. When they finally encountered the Turkish forces near Civitate, they were utterly annihilated. Thousands were slaughtered, their bones left bleaching under the Anatolian sun. In contrast, the real might of Christendom began to gather. Nobles from every corner of Europe, Godfrey of Bouillon, Raymond of Toulouse, Bohemond of Taranto, and others, raised professional armies, sworn not only to reclaim Jerusalem but to carve out legacies of their own. The crusading armies marched eastward, crossing the frozen rivers of Hungary and into the grandeur of Constantinople, a city of marble and mosaics, still the beating heart of a fading empire. Tensions rose as cultures collided. The Latins distrusted the Greeks, and the Byzantines viewed the Crusaders as unruly barbarians. To maintain order, Emperor Alexios demanded that the Crusader lords swear fealty and promise to return captured lands. Reluctantly, they agreed, though in their hearts, many had no intention of keeping those vows. Thus, alliances were forged in mistrust, setting the stage for future betrayal. With oaths behind them and war ahead, the First Crusade turned its gaze toward Nicaea, a stronghold held by the Seljuk Turks. As the walls loomed on the horizon, the Crusaders prepared for their first true siege, with faith in their hearts and steel in their hands. Chapter 2. God Wills It, Journey to the Holy Land. In the spring of 1097, the Crusader army laid siege to Nicaea. The walls of the city, held by the Seljuk Sultan Kilij Arslan, stood tall and unyielding. Yet the Crusaders, bolstered by Byzantine engineers and war machines, encircled the city, cutting off supply routes and launching relentless assaults. Unknown to the Crusaders, Emperor Alexios negotiated a secret surrender with the defenders of Nicaea. Under cover of darkness, Byzantine forces entered the city through a hidden gate and raised their banners. The Crusaders, expecting pillage and glory, were denied the spoils of war. A bitter seed of betrayal had been sown. With Nicaea behind them, the Crusaders pushed deeper into hostile territory. The march across Anatolia was grueling, searing heat by day, freezing winds by night. The landscape was treacherous, the enemy invisible but ever-present. Disease, thirst, and ambushes thinned their ranks. On July 1st, 1097, near Dorylaeum, the Seljuk Turks launched a lightning attack on the Crusader vanguard. Bohemond's troops were surrounded. For hours, they held firm under a hail of arrows and cavalry strikes until Godfrey and Raymond's forces arrived, turning the tide in a storm of steel. In a twist of fate, one of the Crusader leaders, Baldwin of Boulogne, broke away from the main army and entered the city of Edessa. Through cunning diplomacy and political maneuvering, he was adopted as heir by the Armenian ruler and soon took control, founding the first Crusader state, the county of Edessa. By October 1097, the Crusaders reached the legendary city of Antioch, a fortress of immense walls and immense value. For nearly 8 months, they besieged it, battling starvation, disease, and internal betrayal. Supplies ran low, morale cracked, yet they endured, driven by divine will. Inside Antioch, discontent brewed. One of its defenders, an Armenian guard named Firuz, was bribed by Bohemond. On the night of June 2nd, 1098, under cover of darkness, the Crusaders scaled the walls with Firuz's help, opening the gates for their brethren and slaughtering the city's garrison in the name of God. Barely had they taken the city when the Crusaders themselves were surrounded. A vast Muslim army under Kerboga of Mosul encircled Antioch. Trapped within, starving and fearful, the Crusaders turned to relics, dreams, and desperation. A priest named Peter Bartholomew claimed to have received a vision. The holy lance that pierced Christ's side was buried beneath the Church of St. Peter. When the relic was unearthed, it sparked a divine frenzy. The Crusaders believed they now wielded a piece of heaven itself. Emboldened by faith and relic, the Crusaders charged out of Antioch and miraculously routed Kerboga's army. The enemy scattered. Against starvation, plague, and siege, the Crusaders had prevailed. A testament, they believed, to divine providence. Chapter 3. The Rise of the Templars and Hospitallers. As the First Crusade faded into legend, the Holy Land remained perilous. Pilgrims streamed into Jerusalem, often prey to bandits and raiders. Amid this chaos, 2 religious military brotherhoods arose, warriors sworn to protect the faithful with both prayer and the sword. In 1119, a French knight named Hugh de Payens gathered a small band of warriors. With monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, they formed the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ, later known as the Knights Templar. Their mission: protect pilgrims and defend the Kingdom of Jerusalem. In 1129, at the Council of Troy, the Templars received official endorsement from the Catholic Church. Their rule, influenced by Cistercian austerity, was penned by none other than Bernard of Clairvaux, securing divine legitimacy and public admiration. The Templars became symbols of devotion and discipline. Clad in white with the blood-red cross, they struck fear into enemies and awe into allies. Their battlefield tactics were swift and disciplined, their courage fueled by faith and martyrdom. Before the Templars, another order had already laid its roots: the Knights Hospitaller. Originating from a hospital in Jerusalem, they evolved into a powerful military order, combining charity with combat. Their black robes bore the white cross, their code, to care for the sick and fight the infidel. Both orders built mighty fortresses across the Levant, impregnable bastions like Crac de Chevalier, Chastelblanc, and the Templar stronghold at Safed. These were not just walls of stone, but symbols of Christian resolve in a sea of danger. As donations flowed from Europe, the Templars amassed land, gold, and influence. They created the first international banking system, safeguarding funds for pilgrims and lords alike. Their network stretched from London to Acre, their vaults guarded by sacred oaths. The Templars and Hospitallers embodied the paradox of the age, men who prayed like monks but fought like lions. They lived by the rule, abstaining from comfort, yet embracing death in battle as the highest form of devotion. Though united in cause, the Templars and Hospitallers often vied for influence. Their leaders sat at the courts of kings and popes, their armies answered to no crown. As their power grew, so too did suspicion and enemies. Together, the Templars and Hospitallers became the iron wall of Christendom in the East. They led charges, held castles, and stood as protectors of the sacred. Not just warriors, but icons of divine order in a fractured world. Chapter 4. Jerusalem. Blood, Faith, and Fire. Jerusalem, a city of gold, blood, and prophecy. For centuries, Christians, Muslims, and Jews venerated its sacred stones. But for the Crusaders, it was more than holy. It was destiny. A celestial prize sanctified by the blood of Christ and stained by centuries of conquest. In July of 1099, after a grueling march, Crusader forces surrounded Jerusalem. Starved and exhausted, they built siege towers, prayed for deliverance, and prepared for the final push. On July 15th, they breached the walls. What followed was a storm of holy fury. The fall of Jerusalem was apocalyptic. Crusaders, driven by zeal and vengeance, flooded the streets. Muslims and Jews were slaughtered in what would become one of the darkest chapters of the Crusades. A triumph soaked in sacred blood. From the carnage rose a new realm, the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Its rulers styled themselves defenders of Christ's tomb, guardians of holy soil. Baldwin I, crowned as its first king, reigned not by divine right, but by conquest. Latin churches replaced mosques. Frankish law ruled. The Holy Sepulchre was restored and enshrined. Yet beneath the surface, tension simmered. Muslims plotted revenge. Eastern Christians watched warily. Jerusalem, for all its holiness, became a city on edge. The Knights Templar made their headquarters at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, believed to stand atop the ruins of Solomon's temple. From there, they watched over the city. They were more than warriors, they were keepers of divine geography. The Christian occupation transformed Jerusalem's skyline. The cross now stood where the crescent once ruled, but it was a fragile hold. The city, sacred to three faiths, braced for inevitable reconquest. In the east, a new figure emerged, Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub. Charismatic, brilliant, and devout, he vowed to reclaim Jerusalem, not merely for glory, but for God. He would unify Muslim lands and ignite the fire of jihad. Saladin's forces began sweeping across the Levant. One by one, Crusader strongholds fell. Panic gripped the Latin kingdom. In 1187, it all came to a head, not at Jerusalem, but at the Horns of Hattin. The stage was set for a showdown that would shake Christendom to its core. Two worlds, cross and crescent, would clash under the blazing July sun. The fate of Jerusalem and the legacy of the Crusades hung in the balance. Chapter 5. Saladin and the Clash of Civilizations. July 4, 1187. Under the scorching sun near the Sea of Galilee, Crusader and Muslim forces collided. The Franks, led by King Guy of Jerusalem, were trapped. Dehydrated and desperate, their formation crumbled. Saladin's disciplined army closed in with precision. Muslim archers rained arrows as flames spread across the dry grass. The Crusaders rallied around the true cross, their most sacred relic. But the flames, the thirst, and Saladin's tactics overwhelmed them. The battle ended in catastrophe. Most Crusader nobles were captured. The true cross was taken. The Templars and Hospitallers fought to the death. Those captured were executed. The Frankish kingdom was left in ruins. With Hattin behind him, Saladin swept through the Crusader territories. Acre, Nablus, and Jaffa fell with little resistance. The Muslim world rallied behind him. His ultimate prize loomed: Jerusalem. By September, Saladin stood before the Holy City. But unlike 1099, the siege was brief and the bloodshed avoided. Balian of Abilin negotiated a surrender. This time, the city was spared. No massacre, only dignity. Saladin honored his word. Christian inhabitants were allowed to ransom their freedom. The holy sites were protected. Saladin, unlike the Crusaders of 1099, embodied a chivalry that stunned even his enemies. For the first time in decades, Jerusalem was under unified Islamic rule. Saladin's vision had materialized. His triumph was not just military, it was spiritual, a redemption of honor lost. The loss of Jerusalem sent shockwaves across Europe. Churches tolled in mourning. Kings wept. The Pope collapsed and died upon hearing the news. Crusading fever was reborn, and vengeance took root. From England, Richard Thirst, the Lionheart, vowed to retake the Holy City. Alongside Emperor Frederick Barbarossa and King Philip of France, he launched what would become the Third Crusade, the most legendary of all. Though Saladin would never meet Richard in battle for Jerusalem itself, his image, wise, just, and resolute, would shape East and West for generations. He became more than a sultan. He became a legend. Chapter 6. The Fall of the Crusader Kingdoms. The fall of Jerusalem ignited the Third Crusade. Richard the Lionheart, Philip II of France, and Emperor Frederick Barbarossa led vast armies. Yet before reaching the Holy Land, tragedy struck. Barbarossa drowned in Anatolia, and his army crumbled. Richard's forces landed with thunder. His first victory came at Acre in 1191, where he stormed the fortress with siege engines and fire. The Muslim garrison surrendered. Then came a controversial act: 700 prisoners executed. As the Crusaders marched south, Saladin harassed them constantly. But near Arsuf, Richard halted the Muslim cavalry with a brilliant counterattack. Saladin retreated. It was a rare Crusader victory against the Sultan himself. Though close to Jerusalem, Richard hesitated. Political disputes, winter rains, and fear of failure held him back. He never laid siege to the Holy City. Instead, he turned toward diplomacy. In 1192, Richard and Saladin signed the Treaty of Jaffa. Crusaders would retain control of coastal cities. Pilgrims could visit Jerusalem. But the Holy City would remain under Muslim rule. The Crusade ended, but the war had not. The Fourth Crusade in 1204 marked a dark turn. Instead of Jerusalem, Crusaders sacked Constantinople, a Christian city. The Byzantine Empire was devastated. The schism between East and West deepened. Over the next century, Crusader states shrank. The Templars, once powerful, grew suspect. In France, King Philip IV saw a threat in their wealth. In 1307, he struck, arresting them en masse and accusing them of heresy. In 1291, the final blow fell. Mamluk forces stormed Acre, the last Crusader stronghold in the Holy Land. The city was lost. The dream of a Latin kingdom of Jerusalem ended in fire and blood. With Acre gone, the Crusader states ceased to exist. What remained were scattered memories, castles reclaimed by desert, crosses buried in ruins. The holy wars faded, but their echoes endured. Though the Crusaders had failed in their mission, their impact was indelible. Trade expanded. Knowledge flowed between cultures. Warfare, diplomacy, and religious thought evolved. The Age of Knights was waning. A new world stirred. Chapter 7. The End of the Crusades and the Death of Chivalry. After the fall of Acre, crusading fervor waned. Yet sporadic attempts continued. Minor expeditions targeted North Africa, the Balkans, and even Lithuania. But these were crusades in name only, driven more by politics than piety. In 1212, a tragic tale emerged. Thousands of children, believing divine innocence would succeed where armies failed, set out for the Holy Land. Many perished. Others were sold into slavery. It was faith, misled. The knightly ideal forged in the Crusades began to tarnish. Warfare evolved. Gunpowder emerged. The armored knight, once dominant, grew obsolete. Chivalry, once rooted in honor and faith, gave way to courtly pageantry and myth. In 1312, under immense pressure, Pope Clement V dissolved the Knights Templar. Accused of heresy and idol worship, many were tortured. Grand Master Jacques de Molay was burned at the stake in Paris. His death marked the end of an era. As monarchies consolidated power, national armies replaced feudal levies. Kings no longer relied on knightly orders. Loyalty to God was replaced by loyalty to crown and coin. The Crusader vanished into legend. By the 15th century, crusade became a political tool, invoked by popes to rally against heretics or foreign enemies. But the passion, the pilgrimage, the sacred mission, these had faded. It was no longer God's war, but man's. The Knights Hospitaller, though surviving longer, were pushed from the Holy Land to Cyprus, then Rhodes, and finally Malta. Their military might faded, but their legacy of charity and medical care endured. Though the Age of Crusades ended, the memory endured. In art, literature, and myth, knights were glorified. Chivalry became a romantic ideal. Yet the truth was more complex, filled with both piety and brutality. In the Islamic world, the Crusades were remembered not as holy wars, but as invasions. Saladin emerged as a symbol of honor and justice. Memories of resistance and cultural pride lived on across generations. The joust became spectacle. The knight, a ceremonial figure. The crusader, a ghost of the past. As the Renaissance dawned, reason began to eclipse faith. Yet in every story of courage, sacrifice, and conviction, the spirit of the knight endures.